Hello class, continuing with our session of 15 questions before the GATE examination. Today again we are going to discuss a few questions. The first question is from the topic of time and work. Earlier also we had discussed one question of time and work, but today I want to take up a more general type of question which is usually asked in competitive exams, and our concepts should be very clear so that we are able to solve these type of basic questions as well. So the question is on your board. Pause the video, give the question a good try, and once you have solved it, given it your 100%, after that play the video and cross check the solution. So the question reads that Anu, Vinu and Manu can complete a work alone in 15 days, 12 days and 20 days respectively. Vinu works every day, Anu works only on alternate days starting from the first day, while Manu works only on alternate days starting from the second day. So what is the number of days that is required to complete the work? And the options are 5, 6, 7 and 8. So we have 3 people who are doing a particular work. Their individual capacities have also been given. So Anu is going to take 15 days to do the work alone, Vinu is going to take 12 days and Manu is going to take 20 days. And the 3 of them are working together. However, every day all 3 of them are not working. On some days Anu is working, on some days Manu is, and on some days Vinu is. So that's the pattern that we need to find out, right? So we know that Vinu works every day. So if I start with the first day, so I know that Vinu is definitely working. What about Anu? Anu works on alternate days starting from the first day. So Anu is also working on the first day. But Manu is not. Manu is going to start from the second day. So if I come to the second day, Vinu is definitely working. Anu will not be working, but Manu is going to be working, right? If I come to the third day, I know Vinu works every day and Anu is going to work alternatively. So here today is Anu's day as well. And if I come to the fourth day, Vinu is working and Manu is working. And this is how I can go on. This is how I can go on. So again, on the 5th day, you will have V and A. On the 6th day, you will have V and M, and so on. So we need to find out exactly on which day is the total work going to get over. Do I know what the total work is? No, we have just been given the number of days that it takes to complete the work. So in these type of situations, how do we define the work done? How do we define the work done? The work done is defined as the LCM of the number of days that they individually take, right? So let's see. Suppose the total work done is the LCM of 15, 12 and 20, that is 60 units. What does this give me? This gives me per day how much work is being done by Anu, Manu and Vinu individually. So if the total work to be done is 60 units and Anu takes 15 days to do the 60 units of work, so in one day how many units of work is Anu doing? Anu is doing 60 by 15, that is 4 units of work. Similarly, work done by Vinu per day is 5 units, work done by Manu per day is 3 units. So this 60 divided by 15 divided by 12 and divided by 20 gives me 1 day's work of Anu, Manu, Vinu respectively, right? So now if I go back to the pattern that we just saw, I know that on the first day, Vinu and Anu are working, right? That means how many units of work will be done? Vinu's per day work is 5 units and Anu's per day work is 4 units. So the total amount of work done is going to be this 5 plus 4 is equal to 9 units. Second day, I know that Vinu is working and Manu is working, right? So Vinu's 1 day's work is 5 and Manu's 1 day work is 3. So total number of work done is 8 units. So in a span of these 2 days, how many units of work is done? 17 units of work is done, and that is what I'm going to work with because the pattern gets repeated. That's what we saw, that this pattern is going to get repeated. So on the first day on the first 2 days VA VM work, again on the next 2 days VA VM work, again next 2 days VA VM work. So the pattern gets repeated. So we work with the work done in 2 days, right? So work done in a span of 2 days is 17 units. Total work we want to do is 60 units. So we want to go from this 17 to 60. How do we do that? So if in the first 2 days 17 units have been done, in the next 2 days another 17 units will be done. So total units done is 34 units. Similarly, the next 2 days 34 plus 17, 51 units of work will be done. So in the span of 6 days, 51 units of work has been done. Total 60. So remaining is 9 units only. Remaining is 9 units only. So if I again take a span of 2 days, I will be adding 17 units, whereas my requirement is only 9 units. So if you look carefully, 9 units means only the day when Vinu and Anu work, that is going to be sufficient. So 6 days, 51 units have been done. On the 7th day, Vinu and Anu are going to work and complete the remaining 9 units of work. So in a total span of 7 days, the entire work is going to get over. Is it clear? So the final answer is going to be 7. The number of days required to complete the entire work is going to be 7 days. So of course your fundamental need to be very clear if you want to solve questions like this. How we define work, or how we define the total work, how we define the work done per day, and then how do we go about finding out the total number of days required when 3 people are working together but they are not all working on a particular day. There is a fashion, a particular pattern in which they are working, right? Let's move on to the next question. The next question is of yet another very important topic of quantitative aptitude: time, speed and distance. Again, I have picked a preliminary question. You should be able to solve this question if your fundamentals are right, if your basics are clear. Pause the video, read the question, options are on the screen, give it a good try. Once you're done, play the video and cross-check with the solution that we are going to discuss. What have we been given? Govind decides to travel from Mumbai to Pune. After 30 kilometers, there is some engine malfunction and the speed of his car becomes 4/5 of the original speed. So he travels the rest of the distance at a constant speed of 4/5 of the original speed and reaches Pune 45 minutes late. Had the same thing happened after he traveled 48 kilometers, he would have reached only 36 minutes late. So what is the distance between Mumbai and Pune? And the options are 90 kilometers, 120 kilometers, 100 kilometers and 50 kilometers, right? So as I said, a very fundamental question. This type of question would have been asked in almost all competitive examinations, and if your core funda of time, speed and distance is clear, then you're definitely going to be able to solve this question. So let us look at what information has been given to us. So this is, let's suppose, Mumbai to Pune, and Govind starts from Mumbai and he is moving towards Pune. So after 30 kilometers, there is some engine malfunction, because of which, suppose his original speed was S. So now the remaining distance he is going to be traveling with a speed of 4/5 S, right? Let us look at the original situation also. Suppose this is Mumbai and Pune and the original distance is, let's say, D. So if he is traveling with speed S, he is going to take time T. If he is traveling with speed S, he is going to take time T, given there is no malfunction as is planned. However, there is some malfunction after 30 kilometers, because of which his speed is decreased to 4/5 S. If speed decreases, time is going to increase, and the time that he is going to take is 45 minutes more. This is what we know in the first case. In the second case, they are saying that had this particular malfunction taken place after 48 kilometers. So 48 kilometers he traveled with speed S and the remaining distance he traveled with 4/5 S. Then he would have taken only 36 minutes. He would have been 36 minutes late. Right? He would have been 36 minutes late. So in first case, he would have been late by 45 minutes, whereas in the next case, he would have been late by 36 minutes. Right? So where is the difference coming in? If you look at both the pictures, where is the difference coming in? So the first 30 kilometers, in both the case, he is traveling with speed S. The first 30 kilometers, in both the case, he is traveling with speed S. Also, this part, in both the cases, he is traveling with 4/5 S. So it is in this particular distance of 18 kilometers. It is in this particular distance of 18 kilometers that there is a difference in the time. There is a difference in the time. What is the difference in the time? In one case, he is taking 45 minutes and in other case, he is taking 36 minutes. That means there is a difference of 9 minutes. There is a difference of 9 minutes. So this difference of 9 minutes is being caused by this 18 kilometers. In the first case, he is traveling with speed 4/5 S. In the next case, he is traveling with speed S. So if I look at this carefully, if he is traveling by 4/5 S, and suppose he is taking how much time to cover this distance? Suppose he is taking X time to cover this distance. When he is traveling by speed S, he is reaching 9 minutes early. So less than 9. And this is going to be, in terms of hours, 9/60. So when the speed is going from 4/5 S to S, the time is decreasing. There is an increase in speed. there is an increase in speed, so the time is going to decrease, right? So we can find out what this x is, how much time is it taking to cover this much distance. Let us see. From the relations of speed and time, we will be able to find out speed and time are inversely proportional to each other. So 4 by 5s divided by s is equal to x minus 9 by 60 upon x. This is what we are going to solve. So of course this s and s get cancelled. This is a 4x equal to 5x minus 5 into 9 by 60, that is x is equal to 45 by 60. That's what we have, or simply 3 by 4. So x is equal to 3 by 4. Now what is this x? X is the time. X is the time it took to cover a distance of 18 km with speed 4 by 5s. So can I not find out the speed? So if my speed is 4 by 5s, if I take the speed to be 4 by 5s, that is equal to the distance divided by the time. The time is 3 by 4. 3 by 4, 4 and 4 gets cancelled. This is a 6. So s is equal to 30 kilometers per hour. So I have the original speed with me. The original speed is 30 kilometers per hour. So now I have the original speed of 30 kilometers per hour with me. I want to find out the distance. So we want to work with time, because time is something that we don't have. But we know that when there is a change in the speed, how the time is also changing, that much we have. So that's what we are going to apply in the first case here and solve. Let's see. I'll just use a separate color to show you. So suppose this particular distance after 30 kilometers, suppose this is the distance d, right? So the time to cover this 30 kilometers is nothing but 30 by s. The time to cover the remaining distance is d upon 4 by 5 s. We know what s is, and we know that this time is t plus 45 by 60. And I also know what this t is. T is nothing but when the entire distance between Mumbai and Pune is covered with the original speed of 30 kilometers per hour. So the entire distance is nothing but d plus 30 divided by the speed. Speed is nothing but 30. Speed is nothing but 30. So let's substitute the values of d and s and t and find out an equation. So we will be having 30 upon s. S is nothing but 30 plus d, we don't know that, 4 by 5 of s, that is 30, is equal to this t plus 45 by 60. That's all there is. We can find out the value of d from here. This is nothing but a 1 plus d upon 24, d upon 30 plus 1 plus a 3 by 4. The 1 and 1 is going to get cancelled. We are going to get a d 1 by 24 minus 1 by 30 is equal to 3 by 4. 120, so 24 into 5, but 30 into 4, so this is a 1, 3 by 4, and that is going to give me d as 90 kilometers. So d is equal to 90 kilometers and the distance between Mumbai and Pune is going to be 90 kilometers. That is option number A. Is it correct? Is it correct? No, let's go back to the diagram. What is d? D is just a part of the total distance, right? So what is the total distance between Mumbai and Pune? D plus 30. So 90 plus 30, that is 120 kilometers, and the final answer is 120 kilometers. Now this is the exact type of silly mistake that I want you all to look out for in the examination when there is a lot of examination pressure and one eye is on the timer. These are the type of mistakes that students tend to make, and you should be extra careful about this. Always cross-check what has the question asked and what have you finally found out. Whether what you have finally found out is what the question is asking, and only then mark the option and move to the next question. Talking about moving to the next question, I have a very, very interesting inference question to discuss with you. Over the last few years, GATE has been asking a lot of these type of inference based questions. So today I have one passage in front of you. Read the passage, read the options that have been given, pause the video, take your time, and only then cross-check with the solution that I'm going to discuss. Now, it is very important for inference-based questions that you read the passage very, very carefully. Each and every line you should read 2 or 3 times to understand exactly what is the author trying to tell, or what is the passage trying to tell, what is the essence or the summary or the gist of the passage, right? So let us read what the passage that has been given to us here. According to a recent report on higher education in the United States, the 15 universities with the highest annual tuition fees also gave out the largest financial aid awards to incoming students with outstanding achievements. Because of a belief in equal opportunity, these universities are able to redistribute resources from those who can give them to those who deserve them by virtue of their merits. So, which of the following can be correctly inferred from the statement above? So, have you understood what the passage is trying to say? The first sentence is saying that according to a recent report in United States, the 15 universities with the highest annual tuition fees. So, we are talking about 15 universities that charge the highest tuition fees. They also gave out large financial aid to students with outstanding achievements. So, we are talking about 15 universities in the United States that charge the highest fees. They have given financial aid also to students with outstanding achievements. Because of a belief in equal opportunity, these universities are able to redistribute resources from those who can give them to those who deserve them by virtue of their merits. So these universities are in a position to redistribute their resources, take from those who can give them to and give to those who cannot afford, or give to them in terms of financial aid. This is what the passage is telling. So what can we infer from it? So let's look at the first option. Following a belief in equal opportunity is a good way to mask charging higher tuition fees. Now, what is this option saying? This option is saying that belief in equal opportunity is a good way to mask charging higher tuition fees. This seems to be an opinion, right? We don't have any idea whether this is true or not on the basis of the passage that has been given to us. We don't know whether this is a good mask, right? Whether believing in equal opportunity is a good way to mask higher fees or not, we don't know. This is an opinion that they are giving. It may be or it may not be true, so we can't really infer this, right? Let's move on to the next option. It is possible for a university that believes in equal opportunity to put different financial demands on different students. And this seems to be in cognizance with what has been given to us in the passage here. They're saying that because if you look at the second line, they have written the same exact thing, because of a belief in equal opportunity, right? So it is possible for a university that believes in equal opportunity to redistribute resources from those who can give them to those who deserve them. And that's what option B is also saying, that it is possible for a university that believes in equal opportunity to put different financial demands on different students. So this seems to be the correct option. Let's put this on hold. Let's look at this option C. A university that offers large financial aid awards must do so because it believes in equal opportunity. Must do so means it is absolutely necessary that if a university is offering financial aid, it is going to believe in equal opportunity. It might be giving financial aid for any other reason, right? Maybe there are some government compliances, maybe there are some state laws in place, maybe there is some corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility, anything, we don't know. So this is not true. Next option says universities that have high tuition fees tend to give out lots of financial aid. If you look at this option carefully, this seems to be correct, because they are saying that universities that have high tuition fees, here also we talk about universities with high tuition fees, and they give out a lot of financial aid. That's what the first sentence is telling us. But if you look closely in the first sentence, we are only talking about the top 15 universities in the United States. We do not know about universities in general all across the world, or we don't know about other universities which are also taking high fees but not in the top 15. So maybe the top 20 or the top 100. What about them? Do we have any information whether they are giving financial aid or not? No. The passage is telling us only about the top 15 universities of the United States, right? So even though, whereas option D is a more generalized statement that universities that have high tuition fees will give out lots of financial aid, which is not necessary. So option D is also not true. Option E says universities that have large endowments tend to give out lots of financial aids. Endowments has not been mentioned anywhere in the passage, so it's totally out of scope of the passage. We are only left with option B, and that is the correct answer. So this is how you are going to go about questions of logical reasoning or questions of inference. Number one, read the statements or read the premise, read the passage that has been given very carefully and try to understand the essence. What exactly is the author conveying? What is the writer conveying? What is the tone of the passage, right? Second, you work by eliminating options. So go through each and every option and see whether it is fitting or not. If it is not fitting, then it gets eliminated. Finally, whatever option you're left with is going to be the correct answer, right? On this note, I am leaving a practice question here for you from the inference topic only. Pause the video, go through the passage, options have been given. We need to find out which of the following can be correctly inferred from the passage. I want all of you to give this question a try, and whatever answer you get, leave it in the comment section below, and I will definitely go through each of your comments. If you have any doubts, I will answer them, and the correct option, the correct answer will be uploaded in the pinned comment, first pinned comment after 24 hours. So don't forget to check it and cross check the solution as well. I thank you so much for watching. All the best.